I'm just going to reference telling people to go back to. Hello, welcome to episode 107 of Unifying Force. Cat Dave Geo, what's up?
Hello, good morning and or afternoon to everyone out there. And I suppose
hey everyone.
In some places.
Yeah, when does evening to finally start? It's 4:02 now, UK local time. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Dusky. It's a feeling. It's not a time.
Like the Force, it's a feeling.
That's right, exactly. That's how the evening works.
Nice. Okay, so who wants to introduce today's episode? We are talking about something familiar and something.
I'll go. Is like we're gonna talk again about Mortis, and I say again because what?
Why are we talking about this again? We already did 2 episodes on this.
We've done 2 episodes about this, and we're talking about this because it's a good time to do a tie-in with our friends at Clone Wars Revisited. They are right now going through and watching the Mortis arc. They are tomorrow night will be episode 2 of the Mortis arc. They just finished watching Overlords last week and had a really cool discussion. And I think from that discussion, a lot is brought out that we could bring to the table here in talking about how I think Mortis confuses some people, even people in the Star Wars fandom. Is there's the difference between Mortis itself and the world between worlds. It's not the same thing. And then also, kind of tie in a little bit to what the tie-in is to real world religions is, the importance of the Trinity in Mortis. And this is, again, we may even choose to talk about this again after whether it's this year or whether it's next year when Ahsoka season 2 comes out. Because Mortis is going to be super important in Ahsoka season 2. If it's not super important in Ahsoka season 2, the end of season 1 was a huge bait and switch. Okay, if they don't say anything about Mortis, the ending scene, as I actually chose to put that in here as one of our things.
Excellent.
It's
I love it.
It looks like they just ripped off the Argonath from Lord of the Rings.
Well, see, that's probably a viable thing or a viable idea where some of the mythology of this of Mortis came from when George and Dave and whoever else was there putting this together. It came from a lot of different places and a lot of different places that in other media and in the real world. So, do you want to start with a kind of quick synopsis of what in fact Mortis is, Gio?
Quick synopsis. Sure.
Quick synopsis, and we'll get deeper.
Yeah, we'll dive deeper into it. Okay. Well, firstly, I do want to say it might feel a bit repetitive, and I do hear Kat being like, "Why are we doing this again?" But the first time we did it was 2021, and we were basically finding our feet. We were based on Zoom. We had a producer that was, like Palpatine in the shadows whispering to us, Darth Spencer. And Dave hadn't officially joined the show as a permanent co-host. I was in an internet cafe having dodgy, sketchy signal. And then the second episode I was not there for. And I think, Dave, that might have been your first episode where you were on screen and you filled in. So it's on a technical and aesthetic and component point of view, the first time we're all three together as a trinity.
Yes, there you go.
To talk about this.
Well, I know which one I am.
Gio and I are going to have to fight it out for. Well, essentially,
are you the son or the daughter?
The question of who is the more evil?
Gio, what cup am I holding right now?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I know what I can see it. Explain it for the people. Oh, you spun it around. That's self-explanatory.
Yes.
Kat, as a horror fan, I think is immediately drawn to the idea of the Sith and the dark side. But Kat, you can tell us more about that in a moment. I'll just summarize the Mortis arc. It was interesting because I ideally would have. I'm gonna guest star or guest appear, little cameo on the Clone Wars Revisited tomorrow evening, where Mark and Skip and possibly Ashley, I'm not sure, the Clone Wars Revisited crew will be watching the second of the 3 Mortis episodes, called Overlords, and maybe that's the third. I do forget sometimes the
Overlords was one.
Overlords was one. And the second one is, I haven't looked at this since it came out, the names, but I think there's one called Ghosts of Mortis, which was possibly the 3rd episode. But
Altar of Mortis, I believe, is
Altar of Mortis and then Ghosts of Mortis.
Yes.
So that kind of tells its own story. So Overlords is, I mean, from the episode suggestion, and initially when the Clone Wars launched, they didn't always on IMDb or on StarWars.com tell you the name of the episode until it had aired. Because this is pre-Disney. This is kind of 2009, 2010. Season 3 was 2011. So this was season 3, the middle of the series, the middle of season 3 itself in airtime. Were kind of episodes 14, 15, 16, or maybe 16, 17, 18. And at this point, the Clone Wars has taken its fully adult, mature, dark turn. Which started to come about in season 2 with Legacy of Terror and the zombies and the brain worms and the undead Geonosians, and then Barriss Offee being possessed and trying to kill Ahsoka. We had more of Count Dooku and the dark side and his scheming with Darth Sidious in the background. And then we finally had the decision, as the Sith always do, treachery is the way of the Sith. Asajj Ventress was told to be, was ordered from Palpatine to Dooku to have Ventress killed because she was no longer of use, and they were disposing of the Sith assassin and the Dark Jedi apprentice to Count Dooku, to Darth Tyrannus, who I think we can all agree is one of the best Sith names out there.
Yeah, that's a way better name. Why do we keep calling him Count Dooku?
So it's actually Dooku, which Yoda, Frank Oz, speaks and pronounces properly. It's the Japanese term for poison.
Oh.
So the idea is Count Dooku was poisoned over decades to go against the Jedi, fell to the dark side.
Isn't it really sad that his parents named him Dooku even before he became evil?
It's not his first name; it's his title. So he's Count Dooku. So his entire legacy isn't. Yeah. So it's like the Earl of Cambridge or something.
Well, and if you go back and you listen, if you're looking for more content on that, there's really cool. The Count Dooku Jedi Lost audio drama is amazing. I recommend that at every possible point. And you see how one of the things, it's probably something that related to the downfall of Anakin as well, is knowing too much about your pre-Jedi past. Gets very convoluted, very crazy. Like the Jedi at some point gave him a mission, or like let him back on his home world. And then that's where like bullshit starts happening. So no spoilers, but yeah, finding out and knowing about more of your pre-Jedi past doesn't end well historically.
It was him finding out about his post-Jedi life that screwed things up.
Finding out about Tales of the Jedi is very informative in this sense, because there's a 3-episode arc of Count Dooku.
Well, yes, there's that. But there was also, he had already kind of gone down a very weird path when he found out like he had family and there was a sister and there was
So I haven't had the pleasure or the time to read Dooku Jedi Lost, but I've heard from you, Dave. You were actually the first person who explicitly mentioned it to me back in like 2022, that the audio drama was great, and it's a fully immersive experience with the music, the sound effects, and so on. But I think it's my understanding now that a lot of Star Wars audiobooks now have the SFX and the sound and stuff to enhance the viewing. It's not just a simple Count Dooku was feeling
It's like an
bad
audio
today.
drama. Well, Dooku Jedi Lost was also an audio drama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. I think
It was
Dooku Jedi
printed
Lost was
as an audio
done.
drama. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of them are done. It's a book, and then they read it, and they read it with effects and do it. I think Dooku was the opposite. It was
Yeah.
created as an audio drama with multiple voice actors. A lot of them, it's like one voice actor, like slightly changing it up and making effects and things. This one was done with like a full cast audio drama, and then I believe made into a book by Kevin Scott.
Kevin Scott. I think Kevin Scott wrote the script for the audio drama.
Okay.
And then they published that, a bit like how Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, to use another franchise, is a West End and Broadway production. It's a sequel to the Harry Potter 7-book series and film series. Takes place 25 years later with the descendants, the son and daughters of Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Draco Malfoy. But that was also released concurrently as a script in a hardcover, hardback book that you could buy. So effectively, the entire drama as a script can be read in a nice, volume. And Count Dooku's Dooku Jedi Lost is the same situation. And I believe it's the first one they've done in that format, but I doubt it'll be the last. But it's interesting you mentioned about the different voice actors, because I didn't know that. I'd assumed that was the case, because I know for previous audio dramas, especially, or audio books, sorry, they tend to be narrated and read by one voice actor, one artist. Sometimes it's the author. Sometimes
most of them are Mark Thompson.
I learned recently, yeah. Has he been doing it since the EU times?
I don't know about that.
He's definitely an established guy that I've not had the pleasure of listening to just yet. But as somebody who's taking my first steps into performance and voiceover work and voice acting, I will say that I do have something in the works in an audio drama type format. I have one other person in the VCN who has we've suggested, because one of us is male, one of us is female. I could do the male voices, she could do the female voices. We read basically a novel in that sense, and then a bit of post-production magic, which some of you guys can help me out with, to add some sound effects and some music, and we'll hopefully be able to produce something really, really neat and really unique, and for free. So that could be fun.
Boycott.
But yeah, boycott the corporate publishing by Del Rey. No, I'm joking. Del Rey seemed cool.
FYI, Mark Thompson has been doing audiobooks since 2006. Legacy of the Force Betrayal, and that's a lot of that is the stuff that's now Legends.
The end of the EU. Yeah, Legacy of the Force was the final novel series, and it ties in directly to Mortis and Ahsoka season 2, because there are rumors that the fourth character in the Mortis family, the wife who was mortal, became immortal but sacrificed her morality and became this dark side entity, this entropic monster that was hidden in the Maw. So in the original EU, the Maw was this kind of asteroid belt that had this unstable power in the galaxy, and it was sort of controlled by this triangular, almost imagine like the Bermuda Triangle, but in the Star Wars galaxy, between asteroids and dwarf planets. That's what the Maw is. You revisit it actually in your Y-Wing squadron in Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader on the Nintendo GameCube. There's a level called Prisoners of the Maw, and there are people imprisoned who are rebels by the Empire on these asteroids and dwarf planets in the asteroid field that contains the Maw. And as a Y-Wing, you have to hover, you've got to slow down and fly directly over them and drop these like EMP bombs to release the shield, so that the rebels can then flee in ships away from the Imperial prison. And that's level 5 of like 12 levels in the Rogue Leader game. Shout out to LucasArts, because that's an incredible game that hasn't been re-released yet, but we can hope maybe they'll do a re-release for the PS5, Xbox generation right now. But the interesting thing is sorry, just to finish this point, the mother, the stepmother, or known as the mother, became the entity known as Abeloth, who was the ultimate supervillain after Palpatine, she is the ultimate villain in Star Wars in the expanded universe before Disney came and changed things up a bit with the new canon. And as Dave Filoni has always mentioned, and we can talk a little bit about Dave Filoni's recent promotion and Kathleen Kennedy stepping down. He's been the creative chief for a while. He's obviously, spearheaded with Favreau, the Mandoverse, the Mandalorian, and all the other Disney Plus shows, some of which vary wildly in quality and relevance. But he's brought in things from the EU that people have always wanted to see. And he and Lucas created the Mortis idea in season 3 of the Clone Wars, which we're going to talk about now. But the idea of Abeloth being the corrupted, crazy stepmother who wants to destroy all of life as we know it by her insatiable hunger for the Force. She's also an entity that reflects a character from Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lord. So there's a lot of tangential deep dives into LucasArts gaming here. But in the Old Republic, the era where it was 3,900 years before the Phantom Menace, there were thousands of Jedi, hundreds of thousands of Jedi, hundreds of thousands of Sith fighting in a Jedi civil war. Darth Nihilus is a masked, iconic character that Sideshow have actually just released a statue of. I saw yesterday. So check their YouTube and Instagram to see that. They have a quick unboxing by a lady. There's no talking. It's just they show the statue, and it's a very... Think of the Scream mask as a Sith Lord, and this character is no longer human. He's known as the Lord of Hunger, and he sustains his existence by consuming the Force. And Abeloth has that. Is that Darth Nihilus?
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh no, it's yeah.
So Ghostface.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So imagine Ghostface, but from the nose down, it's cut off. So it's like the top of the human skeleton from the jaw up. And he's got a couple of red markings as well, just to make it clear he's a Sith Lord. He uses a red lightsaber. He can fight in combat, which is very bizarre because he's meant to be this ethereal ghost entity. But his physical remains are held together by his longing to consume the Force, not just the dark side, but the Force itself. And Abeloth is similar, whether it's due to her ego and selfishness or her wanting to live forever, the way Palpatine wanted to live forever by cloning and dark side arts. Abeloth wants to live forever. Amazing. So that just came out a few days ago. That's Darth Nihilus. You confront him in the incredible RPG KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, made by Obsidian Entertainment and released in November 2004. It's now available on Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Steam, all the good stuff. You can even get it on Apple, iOS, and Android. And it's really worth, throwing the 10 or 20 bucks towards it to play. It's a very rewarding and immersive experience. If you like D&D, if you like RPG, you don't even have to like Star Wars to have an incredible experience. But this consuming idea of an entity that's so corrupted or so dehumanized and detached from what it means to be human anymore, that they simply want to consume things to survive, is something that is brought forward in the Legacy of the Force series of books, where Luke Skywalker's New Jedi Order have recovered from the Kylo Ren of the EU, which was Jason Solo becoming a Sith Lord known as Darth Caedus, and starting, effectively the war that we saw in The Force Awakens and the sequel trilogy is directly lifted, apart from political differences and not really the same political setup, but the New Republic versus the Return of the Empire, or the Imperial Remnant, or as we know in the sequels, the First Order and the Final Order, that is all directly just rebranded.
They flipped it and changed it, and it's Ben Solo as opposed to Jason and Jaina, and
exactly. They just did a little switch.
Han and Leia's kid, and they flip flopped, but ideas. But let's get back to what we were at. Is we're literally talking about the Trinity, the family of the Force, right? It's the Father, it's the Son, it's the daughter, it's the mother that we're talking about. But these are not necessarily entities. It's not necessarily a family. They're all different species. They're all just different Force gods, literally, like Force powers in there. And part of the problem with the mother becoming this Abeloth, which is literally like the bringer of chaos, was her desire to be beyond mortal. She was a mortal who came in and brought peace between the son and the daughter, the light and the dark, which were like warring, which is technically supposed to be the father's job because he's supposed to be balance. But if you watch the Mortis arc like we were watching the other night, and we will be watching again tomorrow night with Clone Wars Revisited, the father is not really balancy. The father is really kind of pushy. He's like set this entire trap deal kind of to lure Anakin into the deal, and he's kind of setting them up.
So I'll just quickly touch on that. So the Mortis overlords, I'll set up the episode. I'll give you like a little synopsis of the episode. The first one of the Mortis arc, we have these entities that we come across. So Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan are investigating an ancient Jedi signal that's not been used for thousands of generations. Yoda mentions in the prologue, and he dispatches our three heroes to investigate it. There's a specific coordinates in the galaxy that they're heading towards, and Rex on the Jedi cruiser, which becomes Imperial Star Destroyers, the big ones, that are seen in the Clone Wars and a lot in the end of Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars, the Battle of Coruscant to begin Revenge of the Sith. Rex has his own one that's kind of colored in the same way that his uniform is, with the blue highlights. And Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka communicate with him at the beginning and say, "Hey, we're here. Where are you guys?" And Rex's response is, "I'm at the coordinates. Where are you?" And then suddenly they see two pyramids connected by a hollow middle in space in front of them. It's unknown.
Which kind of reminds you of the World Between Worlds. That's where some of the confusion lies.
Yeah, let's postpone the World Between Worlds even comments until a little bit later, because
they are directly related to each other.
Of course they are, but I'm going chronologically at the moment, just through the Clone Wars bit. The World Between Worlds was the same concepts of Mortis and the Overlords and these four spirits between dark, light, and the balance of the father, and the fact that Anakin gave up a potential destiny where he was supposedly meant to take the place of the father, stay on the planet forever, and keep the daughter and son, manifestations of the light side and the dark side of the Force, physically in check as like a half light, half dark. He's the one in the middle. And this idea of a trinity of powers is very ancient and has a lot of world belief systems, even predating the term religion and the Western Abrahamic faiths and the religions of that sense, going back to almost. There's evidence in cave paintings that are found in Europe, in East Asia, in Africa, of the idea of this sense of divinity being one single power, but it's manifested in three elements. And it goes back to
it's the Triforce in Zelda.
I was hoping someone would bring that up organically, because I'm gonna otherwise just come across as the biggest geek nerd ever. The number of video game references I would drop here. But yeah, Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of the Legend of Zelda series, the origins of that history and that world are essentially that there were three goddesses that had the power of the Triforce. The Triforce is the original power in the universe that creates everything, the god, essentially, the divinity, the source of everything. And it's split by these three goddesses who, I think one is fortune, one is physicality, one is wisdom. Well, there's knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, something like that. And they're all represented by physical elements. So one is a goddess of wind, one is a goddess of water, one's a goddess of fire. And we see the elements being an origin story in so many, from tribal belief systems, from indigenous and first peoples in the Americas, in Africa, in Australasia, in Asia, in the Middle East. And then we see it brought forward into more well-known belief systems. And so the first manifestation the six major world belief systems that are acknowledged in Western curricula and academia go by the three Abrahamic religions that everyone knows quite well, which are the religions of the book of the Old Testament is significant in all three, obviously more important in one of them. So that would be Christianity, it would be the Jewish religion, and it would be Islam. And the reason why I specifically try not to use any terms going forward with an ism at the end, apart from explaining it, is because in the Oxford and Cambridge English dictionaries, the suffix of something, a belief or a concept, and then an ism, is actually a deliberate colonial construct to undermine whatever belief system it's describing. And
Well, we talked in the past about how all of these have been disproven effectively, though. So, I mean,
what do you mean disproven?
well, like when you trace the source of where a lot of these religions came from and how they sourced from previous religions, and they kept building on it to add things that their cultures liked, put a new spin on the story. Kind of like how Christianity is just Zoroastrianism with a different spin on it, and then Judaism is kind of an offshoot of that in Egypt, and then they just kind of, everything's kind of building on each other.
I mean, that comes back to the reason why we chose the name the Unifying Force for the show,
Yeah.
because one, it was a great term. It was a great book, The End of the New Jedi Order, which I finally got hold of my hard copy, as you guys know. There's 18 books in that series. I've only got 7 of them. I don't want to start the series properly until I have them all, but that's just me being pedantic and OCD. Please forgive me.
Oh, no, that's good, because you want to have all the books, because they're pretty easy reads, so you need to have all of them before you start reading.
Yeah, and as with anything in life, right, it's the momentum that you build up with consistency and discipline. An 18-book series where I have to physically hold the books and maybe take them on my commute on the train every day, is going to take discipline. But yeah, I mean, Dave knows that I carry far too many. I carry.
Well, you don't have to carry all 18 of them on a given day.
I carry my physical baggage as a representation of my emotional baggage. I always have too many books on me. Everyone can attest to that. Even friends that I haven't yet met in real life, like Dave and Kat, which we'll sort out this year, I hope.
Yes.
But yeah, so coming back to Mortis, the idea of this Trinity is really important because there's that element that we mentioned about Joseph Campbell in the beginning of the show that we essentially do touch on again, the monomyth, the idea that the mythology all tends to be the same sort of stories. And when we say the same stories, we don't mean to undermine or offend anyone. We're essentially just saying that in a succinct way to explain that what Kat mentioned and alluded to directly, that there are some unifying concepts. There's one truth that kind of runs through a lot of belief systems, and that is you're a human, you're a custodian of the earth, and this goes back to indigenous First Peoples beliefs a lot, which has been obviously erased, and then there's a movement academically to resurrect that knowledge and add to the curriculum of religion and philosophy and belief systems and history. And this is propagated by anthropology.
Look back at a lot of that. A recent issue or episode of the show is in the Halloween special that we did this year, whereas a lot of this is the unifying force of this, the unification of these different religions and religious beliefs, and where they came from this, they came from that, argue that, but it's a lot of it's natural cycles. It's the light and the dark, the physical light and the dark of the times of the year, and a lot of the belief is based upon that. Scoob has a great comment or question here.
Ooh, nice.
Okay, so do we think Anakin's role as the Chosen One in the Chosen One prophecy and bringing balance to the Force is more related to Mortis rather than a defeat of the Sith, thus the reason for his perceived failure, and will be resolved in Ahsoka season 2? Because again, I think it is confirmed that Hayden will be back.
Yeah, so it was confirmed during season 1 that he's signed on for a future season. Let's take that question in turn each. Who wants to go first?
I'll give it a shot. So
just what you feel is the answer, not what you think George Lucas intends. We can.
Okay.
I feel like we know there's enough behind the scenes interviews of Dave Filoni, who, if we take Dave Filoni to be Lucas's apprentice, and pretty much his canon and his storyline and his conceptualization of the Force is George Lucas's, but a little bit expanded laterally. There is an answer to this question, a correct answer if you want, but I think it's nice to have our own takes first. So how would you answer that, Dave?
My take of that is it depends upon what you've seen and at what point you are in your Star Wars lore. Because if you have just seen the major movies, you're like, oh, well, maybe they just made a mistake and Anakin wasn't the Chosen One. He just displayed a lot of the properties of the Chosen One because he was technically the father of the Chosen One, being Luke. Maybe there's that. But if you've seen and you've watched the Mortis arc, and if you're watching along on Clone Wars Revisited, is specifically, Anakin was brought to Mortis, and yeah, he's got Ahsoka and he's got Obi-Wan with him, but he was brought there by the father to, a little bit spoilers, kind of being offered to be one of the Mortis gods. So whether that makes him, I don't know that makes him the chosen one in the chosen one prophecy, because that they're talking about that's I don't know. Is I think the Jedi possibly have interpreted being the chosen one to what they wanted it to be. They wanted, it's the defeat of the Sith. It has to be the defeat of the Sith to bring the balance to the Force. That's their thoughts. Was that the thoughts of the universe, of the Mortis gods, of what their completely was? Possibly not. It's just like, we need some of this. Is going to be this is going to be that. And like I mentioned, they're not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a family, that trinity, the father, the daughter, the son, as we'll talk about probably here in a little bit. That's changeable. It doesn't have to be the same person, doesn't have to be the same entity all the time. It has to be something that embodies that universal force.
Yeah.
And maybe Anakin's supposed to become part of that. I don't know. Somebody else.
Anakin is the chosen one, per George Lucas. He does fulfill the prophecy. He destroys the Sith. The Jedi are just very self-centered and didn't realize that they were the ones who created the problem, because the Jedi Order was corrupt. It had to fall. That's why Dooku leaves the Jedi Order, because he's. It's funny because Dooku is very much a character like Saruman, and Christopher Lee also played in the Rings trilogy, where it's like, here's a problem, I'm going to try and solve it, but he has his own ambitions and wants to take over. And same with Dooku. He wants to have a bigger say, because the Jedi Council won't really give him that much deference. But it's like, yeah, the Jedi were broken. They lost their way. They cared more about midichlorians than they did about the living force that within each individual being. They're subservient to a corrupt Senate. And so the fact that they essentially had been disabled from even being able to sense that, Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious are trying to cheat death over here, and they can't even sense that this is going on. And the Force is like, that's it. We're done. We're done with you. We're changing it. And then they create Anakin, and he does what he set out to do. And there's actually a featurette about that on the Revenge of the Sith DVD, where George Lucas definitively says, yes, Anakin is the chosen one, and he does fulfill the prophecy, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It just doesn't happen the way the Jedi. That's why I wish in the Kenobi series, when Qui-Gon shows up at like the end, and they teased him on Mortis even, but I really wanted Obi-Wan, like, what would that conversation be like? Because, like, I don't think Qui-Gon saw all the death and destruction that was going to happen. He could just see the light at the end of the tunnel, because he's so in tune with, like, the Force. Like, he could see that this
more
is
about the living Force than the Jedi training.
Right, and that's why it's like, man, I would have loved, like, after he has that little greeting with Obi-Wan at the end of the Kenobi series, if you could have had, like, an extended conversation, because that would have been amazing.
Well, we got some of that in the first episode of the Mortis arc.
Well, that was different, because at that point in the story, Anakin hadn't fallen to the dark side yet and done all those terrible things. So he, per the master himself, Anakin is the chosen one, and he succeeded. It's just a tragic tale.
Yeah, it's a Shakespearean tragedy. It's a Greek operatic tragedy. George Lucas has been very clear about this even before he did the Clone Wars with Dave Filoni, before even the Mortis idea came about. And I have to say this, I was reflecting on this with a friend and with some family earlier today ahead of this, as I kind of mentally prepared for the show. And I was doing some thinking out loud, and I was talking about how the Force has been, it's just like the concept of divinity or of God, as manifested in humans through organized religion, churches, mosques. In the East, it's a lot more spiritual, metaphysical, and philosophical. That's why, again, I say the suffix ism to describe the other three major world faiths after Christianity, Islam, and the Jewish faith. And notice I don't say Judaism, because, again, Judaism is not an internal, endogenous term that the Jewish religious community used to describe themselves. It's what Christianized, anglicized Western academics from Oxford and Cambridge University use to describe the faith. And whether they know it or not, the ism thing is meant to undermine something, to just be a school of thought, not to be something as established as a
Use the
religion.
term that the practitioners of said religion use to describe themselves. It's the same
See
thing
that,
as
yeah,
like describing the Inuit people or whatever. You know, you need to use the correct indigenous term.
ideally, yeah, that's a big thing that academia is finally catching up with now. And you know, however polarized and you know, aesthetically focused identity politics has become, and the culture war of, you know, how you refer to things in 2026, I think the world is finally maturing a bit and realizing that we don't need to have these silly internet debates about things. We don't need to be so hostile in person and argue at PTA meetings about, you know, which books should be allowed in schools, because some scientific stuff might, in some people's wrong opinion, in my eyes, contravene aspects of Christianity, where, you know, Albert Einstein was one of the most devout religious people ever. So was Isaac Newton. So are these artists and authors like William Blake, my favorite poet in the English language, criticized heavily organized religion in the Catholic Church. Yet he was one of the most spiritual people ever. And that comes across in his poetry very clearly. And in the East, you have entire belief systems that are based around scripture that is purely poetic and musical. So the three other belief systems that I must mention before I forget, so England, my home country, would call it Buddhism, Sikhism, and Hinduism. But really, it is the Buddhist belief system. Buddha refers to the one with great wisdom. So the actual name of the belief system by Buddhists who have the historical education and know about this, because even in these communities of belief systems, because they've been so colonized and so extricated from what they originally were, there are people that might identify and practice this belief system who actually don't know that the etymology they use in the English language, that might be their first language or might be their second or third language, is actually meant to dehumanize their belief system and undermine and undercut it. So the Buddhist belief system is actually referred to more by Buddha's original name, which was Siddhartha Gautama. And Gautama was his royal surname because he was essentially a king, a prince, a lord, who then had this metaphysical moment, reflected and meditated, and then gave up all his worldly possessions and, you know, went around his part of the world, feeding the homeless and, you know, empowering people with this wisdom that he had. And so it's actually called Siddharth, means the true path. And it comes from Sanskrit, which is the mother of all the Indo-European languages. Ancient Greek is actually a direct correlation from Sanskrit. And if you did like a family tree of languages for the linguists out there, shout out to them, because I think linguistics and etymology and that side of anthropology through language is fascinating, and it influences the words we use daily. Sanskrit is the progenitor, and then you get ancient Greek, Koine Greek as it's called, then you get a slightly modernization of Greek, then you get Latin, which was then propagated by the Roman Empire, and then Christianity, as the Catholic Church formed, Latin became the major mother tongue for many people and across Europe. And then from Latin, you have the Romance languages such as French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, and lots of localized versions of these things. And English is an interesting creation. One could say Samuel Johnson, the first person who created a dictionary of English words, along with, if you believe Shakespeare was a real person, which is another topic for another day. But Shakespeare, through his plays and through his poems, people forget that Shakespeare had all these poems and sonnets as well, which I feel like only English teachers really talk about. But people know him from his plays, the comedies, the tragedies, the historical plays, which feeds directly into Star Wars thematically. But he created lots of words that we use now. And you can literally Google and find a glossary of thousands of words that Shakespeare used and then became part of the English language. But the English language is an interesting hybridization of a lot of Latin and Romance languages, which is why we have very similar grammar structure to the languages I mentioned already. But also we share a lot of the cases in linguistics with German. And we have lots of Germanic influences, which is why English is actually a very complicated language to learn as a second language. And ideally, to master English, the best thing of all would be to learn it as you're growing up with whatever other languages that you do learn. And some countries now in the West and in the East and in the Middle East and in Africa, they teach English along with the local French or the local, Xhosa in South Africa, for example, or you know, in India, English is taught with Hindi as two languages that you grow up with in school. And speaking to friends who've grown up in France or in Germany, English is, you know, taught from almost the very beginning, if not from nursery, the beginning of primary school for me, the beginning of elementary school for you guys. And so that's how that people sort of develop. And once you have the language set, then you can start to dissect and analyze and have these deeper conversations, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have to learn English as a second language. I mean, my sort of second language would be like I studied and learned a bit of French, but you can see that where
Mhm.
the foundation of that language comes from. If you understand French, you can basically figure out Spanish, but it's not that way
Yes.
for anything else in English because English has so many parts from so many
Yeah.
places.
I mean, one could say it's a perfect analogy to what became the British Empire, right? Going around the world, stealing things from everywhere and creating your own and claiming it as English. I mean, English is literally the most a direct result, I guess one could say. One beneficial thing of colonialism is that the English language has so much depth and so many borrowed words that allow you to actually learn bits in other languages. You know, we use words that are influenced by French and German all the time, and we take it for granted. You know, I wake up today and I have a raison d'être. What is that? It's a reason to be, a reason to live. We use Latin abbreviations all the time, like etc, ie, eg. You know, we use Latin terms in medicine, in anatomy and physiology, in the sciences. We use it in law. So many of our legal terms in the UK are Latin terms, and I think it's quite similar in North America and the US and Canada as well. So yeah,
And
it's again
tying that all back in is all of these things from all of these places are the inspirations and the ideas behind that Mortis, right? It's little bits of sprinkled from here and there and the other, getting back to where Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka land is, you know, they're in Mortis like is as a physical space, right? Though it's not necessarily a realistic physical space. It looks like Pandora.
I said the same thing when I rewatched it on Monday ahead of the Clone Wars Revisited. That's absolutely Pandora.
It completely looks like Pandora, but Mortis. So Mortis is kind of your interpretation. Oh, it's paradise. It's the Garden of Eden. It's the beginnings. It's that analogy to the religion, but it's so changeable. The landscape changes, and then you move over tonight, and you get this, right?
Yeah.
You know, these are both images directly taken from Wikipedia about Mortis. And so Mortis takes places and things and pieces from different parts. It in my mind, potentially, okay, here's the way I think about it. And Mortis is both heaven and hell. It's both. And then the world between worlds is almost purgatory. Is it's, you know, your transition to Mortis. And I don't know what that means exactly for.
Well,
Interesting
Go ahead.
concept. Yeah.
that's why it's not a coincidence they decided the evil person is going to be the mother, because they're doing the whole Christian allegory thing.
Oh, where Eve succumbs to temptation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll just touch on that. So Abeloth was created in the Legacy of the Force series by the three authors that finished that series of books, which was this final series of proper novels, adult, you know, novels, to finish the EU, which kind of finished in 2012, 2013. And Disney bought the enterprise, the IP of Star Wars and Lucasfilm itself in 2012. And then in 2014, they announced, you know, one of the last novels ever was actually Darth Plagueis by James Luceno. And that has a fantastic aspect of the Force that we can touch on here, but we can dive deeper in the future, where the dark side and the Sith, in the Sith Lords that come just preceding Palpatine, preceding Darth Sidious, they bring these aspects of the Force up that are mentioned by Qui-Gon Jinn and by Count Dooku, both in the Phantom Menace for Qui-Gon and in the Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi for Count Dooku, and that is the idea of the living force, which is what Obi-Wan, what Ben Kenobi tells Luke about initially in A New Hope in Star Wars 1977. The force is, it's in us, it binds us, it penetrates us, and it binds the galaxy together. And then Yoda reiterates this further in Empire Strikes Back on Dagobah to Luke's training as a Jedi Knight, and says, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. So there's something beyond all of us, like this inner light, this inner energy that is eternal, and that's part of the universe, part of the origin of the universe. And that very much goes in line with some of my personal beliefs, which is why I feel the John Williams music, to me, Yoda's theme, from The Empire Strikes Back, that you hear a little bit in Dagobah, and then you hear really well on the credits after the initial Star Wars, roll to black, blue credits come up, you got the Star Wars main theme, and then it goes into, before the Imperial March, it goes into Yoda's theme. And that's really powerful and emotional to me, and sometimes it actually chokes me up, because the way Yoda describes things to Luke, to me, has always been quite... I saw Obi-Wan as the avuncular character, as the pseudo-father for Luke, the stepfather almost, the godfather, not the mafia kind, the wise old uncle. And, that's what Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen refer to him as, the crazy uncle in the Jutland Wastes. But he's the cool uncle, really, to me, that tells you how things are in the world, whether you like to believe him or not.
Gives you a laser sword with zero direction on how to use it. Here.
Yeah, I mean the training remote on the Millennium Falcon kind of taught him how to
5 minutes. It's like, here is your first BB gun, son.
Yeah,
you
taking
don't
your first
point it at your face.
Yeah, pointy end away from you. Yeah, taking his first steps into a larger world is what Obi-Wan says right before he senses Alderaan's been destroyed. So I think it's really interesting that Yoda then touches on this again. He says, life breeds it, makes it grow. The force is grown by life, but it is life, it's within life. And he says you can feel it between you and I, the rock, the ship, in the swamp, in that dark cave that Luke, does Luke hallucinate the dark cave? Or is the cave actually there? He does physically walk into it, and then he confronts a figment of his imagination, or some kind of concept of Darth Vader, which is actually him behind the mask. That idea goes back to Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, but it also goes back to the sense in mythology and in spirituality of one, confronting your fears, your vices, your anxiety, your anger, your rage, your repressed id, to use a Sigmund Freud part in Western philosophy. The ego and the id is the kind of binary, the light and dark almost, in the psyche of humans. And Freud was very clear that the ego is your upper level personality, and the id is your animalistic base instincts, from which some potentially problematic things in your behavior can come. Your anger, your lust, your resentment, your selfishness, your egotism is not from your ego, it's from your id. And it's interesting because if you go Eastern philosophy style, the term ego actually means the id, which is why there's a gigantic level of confusion if you're somebody who's raised on Eastern beliefs but are born in the West. When you read English translations of Eastern scripture from, the Buddhist faith, from the Sikh faith, there's this idea that ego is kind of the enemy. And I say the enemy to be very superficial and nonchalant about it. It's part of your personality, it's part of your soul, your consciousness, your psyche. But the ego is the thing that from which all the issues behaviorally stem. One could say that, to use the Christian concept, vices and sins come from the ego. And the reason why is because the ego is the sense of yourself being more important than other things, and yourself being the center of your universe perceptually. But as we know, that you are not the center of the universe. But you are the universe.
Speak for yourself. My universe.
Yeah, but there are books that are printed in English by people who have grown up in the West who are, I'd say, quite enlightened, because either they've chosen to read these things philosophically, find these English translations of these ancient and modern scriptures. Some people to shout out are Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra. They've written books that are entitled things like "You Are the Universe," and the concept behind that is spiritual but also physical. physically, we are all stardust. This is something that Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about in a lot of his documentaries and in a lot of his interviews on TV. He's a good physicist, but not an incredible, revolutionary physicist. But he is one of the best personalities we have out there for science policy and science communication. And
Well,
if
he
you
tells a good story. He relates it. He takes giant nebulous topics
Mm.
and can kind of explain them to the masses somewhat.
He also has very clickbaity posts on his Facebook page.
Yeah, he does that too.
Oh, I don't follow him on Facebook.
He knows he's got it down. He or someone in his organization,
his agent,
his organization.
Yeah, no, he's definitely got an agent.
People at this point, come on, he's got people.
I know.
The NDGT crowd, the Neil deGrasse Tyson.
He's got somebody who manages it well enough to get people interested in his content.
Yeah, I think he's suave, he's very charismatic, he's very eloquent, he's a great orator, a great raconteur, he's a storyteller, like you say. But I do take inspiration from him in that sense, because I think the way he presents himself is very dignified, and he's had some intense and serious and horrible debates with intense and serious and horrible people, whether they're, this is not to offend anybody, and I think atheism is as valid a belief point as any religion is, but there are some rabid atheists out there, and Neil deGrasse Tyson initially came across as one of those. But I think in the 20 or 30 years he's had in the public eye and debating people who are religious or atheist or agnostic or spiritual, he's come to realize his own spirituality. And if you just Google or put on YouTube, the most amazing fact, but this was the case about 6 years ago where I found this. There's an interview, and there are like fan videos of this line of dialogue, this paragraph that Neil deGrasse Tyson says in an interview, where someone asks him, I think it might be 60 Minutes on CBS, Neil deGrasse Tyson, what is the most amazing fact in life or that you've ever come across? And he says, the most amazing fact is that everything that's within us are things that are eternal and elemental. So the stardust, and this comes back to Rogue One, which is why I think Rogue One and Galen Erso, Project Stardust, which is named after Jyn Erso, the affectionate term that her father gave to her, and the reason why she carries a kyber crystal around her neck is because kyber crystals are meant to grow in the hearts of stars. And while that's physically impossible by our universe's physics, just in terms of having a physical crystal, the idea is there, the kernel of truth is there, which is that the elements that we know of the periodic table from are made of atoms, and there are even subatomic particles. The word atom originally comes from atomos in Greek, which means uncuttable or indivisible, because the original concept was the atom was the smallest thing that we could be made of. But now, there are leptons, neutrinos, gluons, subatomic particles that make up the electrons, that make up the neutrons, that make up the protons. And these are all things that have only come about like in a popular and in an academic way in school and university curricula, have only come about in the last 10 years. When I was at primary school, and you talked about atoms a little bit, because science in elementary or primary school is not really very good science. Atom was, you talk about elements, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, helium, the elements that make up everything. 3 of them comprise 99% of our atmosphere on Earth that allows us to breathe. But hydrogen and helium are the original elements. That's why they're the first on the periodic table, and they're found in stars. And so Neil deGrasse Tyson says we are all stardust because the elements and the subatomic particles that make up what becomes stars go through this cycle that we talk about, that you mentioned at the top of the show, Dave, cycle of creation and destruction. It's a part of life. It's the circle of life, right?
It's the Lion King.
It is.
You go first, Dave.
Like literally James Earl Jones explained it the best. It's like, yes, but don't we eat the antelope? But when we die, we become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass.
Yeah, we return to where we came from, and I think that's the goal of life, really, is to understand that and make peace with that, and then understand that your time time is a human artificial construct, but your time is limited. And what Robert Downey Jr. I think says as Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, no amount of money ever bought a second of time. And they do time travel in the Avengers to save the universe and defeat Thanos. But what is he saying? He's saying that he sees his father as somebody who was detached and kind of absent, Howard Stark to Tony Stark. And he revisits the 1970s where Howard Stark's wife is expecting him, Tony Stark.
Yeah.
And he realizes that if he is to become a father, as he does 5 years after Infinity War and the snap, when he has his daughter, he realizes the most important part is not being an Avenger and saving the galaxy, saving the Earth, creating a shield around the Earth, which became Ultron and was a very bad idea.
That didn't go well.
It didn't go too well. But Justice for Ultron, though, he was a great villain, and James Spader is a great actor. So I would love to see him brought back in Secret Wars for a little bit. But the idea that time is actually the most valuable thing, and money is just a way. Money and power, and accreditation in the world, whether it's university degree or being a lord in the House of Lords in England, all those things just to give you a bit more money and power so that you can use your time the way you want to without having to think about rent and bills and cost of affordability crises, the housing market crashing, AI taking your jobs. All these things are distractions, and really what we want is time for ourselves to find peace, to find joy, to find some happiness. And that's what these things come down to. The concept of the Force is beyond space and time, and it's about that original energy. It goes back to, again, Stardust. What are we? We are things that make up the universe. And as humans, we've allowed these materiality and materialism and consumerism in the modern, since industrialization, I'd say consumerism and capitalism have been the major world religions, more so than the six belief systems that we talk about, because all of our everything is connected to money, connected to trade, connected to the political and economic organization of the world. And it's all about, can you survive? Can you earn money? And it takes you away from the temporal, the material, the physical, which is mentioned by the father in Overlords, the first episode of the Mortis arc. He says that we were so powerful, we are Force wielders, we are of the Force, we are not Jedi, we are not Sith, we're beyond that. But Anakin, you, whether you're the chosen one or not, whether you pass my test I'm about to give you about controlling my two children at the same time, light and dark, daughter and son, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, I'm going to test you to be whether you fulfill my interpretation of the chosen one prophecy as the one who will bring balance and maintain balance forever, not just in the galaxy, but in the universe. And it's really important that people note, if we're doing a deep dive on Star Wars and talking about the spirituality of it all, from George Lucas and Dave Filoni, they start talking about not the galaxy, but the universe in Overlords.
Yeah.
It's about controlling and having peace in the universe. And we go back to what Kat mentioned. George Lucas's original description of the Force is the best one to understand light and dark. It's not really yin yang, even though in the sequel trilogy with the Prime Jedi and the concept art of the Last Jedi, there's idea that there's a yin yang, a push and pull, a tension that Luke Skywalker uses to tell Rey about the Force. But it's not about light and dark being antagonistic equal forces. George Lucas is saying light and dark is one binary interpretation of it that is valid for some Force groups. For Jedi and Sith, that's how they conceptualize it. But the Force is much more beyond that. And that's what the father tells Anakin. You're beyond Jedi and Sith. Yeah. Even the son says...
Well, that was also in The Last Jedi, though. That's not a yin-yang symbol. That is the duality that is within everybody. That's a very Carl Jungian type idea.
But where did Carl Jung take it from? He took it from the East. If you read Jungian philosophy, he directly takes it from the concept of the Tao.
Everything is from everything. Is the ideas? These are people that are writing a story in Star Wars, and they've taken inspiration from places. I posed a question during the comments of last week's Clone Wars Revisited: is what if Anakin is the Mortis gods, or they want him to replace? Is Anakin, and we see that he doesn't. But Anakin could be the light. Anakin could be the daughter. Vader could be the son.
The son, yeah.
And Anakin, the chosen one, could be the balance, could be the father. And so within that one individual, that kind of brings it back more to a Christian assumption, which is the Trinity is one. The Trinity is God, but the Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And what if Anakin is all of them?
Exactly, but I agree with your interpretation completely, and I think it matches Lucas and Filoni. So that metaphor that I was coming to, sorry for the tangents, but we're talking about many things here: science, physics, philosophy, spirituality, institutional religion. The idea of the Force being, the Force is peace, the Force is the universe, the Force is the energy flow of everything. It has a natural order, which is peaceful and not chaotic. It is an open energetic system, and as soon as you impose artificial, egotistical human constructs on it to control it, is where you start having issues and things go out of balance. Corruption occurs. The dark side of the Force is not the natural order. The natural order is not light and dark pushing and pulling Kylo Ren, from Ben Solo and Anakin talking to him supposedly. Then we find out it's actually Palpatine inside his head pulling him further to the dark. The idea is that you've got this concept. We'll come to that comment in a second. That's a great comment. Thank you, Jim, Scooby. But yeah, Trinity Skywalker. Let's go with that. The idea of the Trinity being that light, dark, and balance is in everyone, but it's the balance that George Lucas is talking about. The very opening, I'm going to misquote it now, but you know how there's the fortune cookie almost opening morality.
Well, yeah,
line.
The moral of every single episode.
Yeah, and balance is found in he who is free of his guilt, or releases his guilt, is the opening Clone Wars line of the Mortis trilogy in Overlords. And what does that mean? They're talking about Anakin, right? Anakin carries the tragedy, the anger, the guilt of losing his mother and being unable to save her, despite having these prophetic dreams that became, shout out to our previous episode, a self-fulfilling prophecy, the Ouroboros, that's the snake eating its own tail. Anakin was so fixated in the material, in the temporal, that he didn't appreciate something beyond that, which was the Force itself, the metaphysical, the philosophical. He thought he had the power to stop a death that was written, that was destiny, from happening. And why did he do that? Because he had an ego in the Eastern sense, id in the Western sense. He was entitled and groomed from an early age to have been the highest M count ever when Obi-Wan takes his blood sample, beyond even Master Yoda. And what does that mean? The Jedi fixated on details and missed the bigger picture. Qui-Gon Jinn was a big picture guy. Qui-Gon Jinn had said, it doesn't matter about the age of the individual. It's about how you instruct them, how they are an apprentice to you, and how they have a more broad, all-encompassing, unifying concept of the Force. And this is what Qui-Gon uses. And amazingly, I think Revenge of the Sith is one of my favorite films of all time, and right up there on my top tier of Star Wars, including all the stories we've had in EU, in canon, in Clone Wars, and in Rebels, and The Mandalorian. The reason why The Revenge of the Sith is so good is because it gives you, hopefully, motivation to read the most important book in Star Wars canon, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover. And this is not an ad, but I do suggest you go and track down either the original copy on eBay or something, charity shop, thrift shopping, or get the anniversary version that came out last summer. It's a beautiful book. Unfortunately, it's like $50 or $60, £50. It has concept art. It has incredible artwork when you open it. On the left side, I think, is the image of Anakin with Padme, and on the right side, after Anakin's fallen at the end of the book, the inside artwork on the inside right-hand cover is, I think, Anakin and Obi-Wan dueling, and that summarizes Anakin's hero's journey. His hero's journey was not the classic hero's journey. His son Luke and then Rey had the classic hero's journey. Anakin was Gabriel. Anakin was in Paradise Lost. He was Milton's hero that fell from grace. He's a hero that falls. And then the battle of the heroes commences. Anakin submits to his fear, to his sense of attachment. He doesn't have the guidance of Qui-Gon, the father figure he needed. He has the guidance of Obi-Wan, who is more of an elder brother to him. And that's why the relationship fails, because a sibling is not a replacement for a parent. I think this is a really good familial message that I only understood later as I got older and revisited The Revenge of the Sith. And the novel goes into this concept of the unifying force because Palpatine uses that, but uses Anakin's misunderstanding of the Force and his very narrow, dogmatic view of the Jedi in the Jedi Order. The Jedi Order is very much an analogy
Takes
to
advantage
the
of
church,
the lack
right?
of the he takes advantage of the lack of a father figure to become that kind of father figure and give him that advice because Obi-Wan's not giving it.
Yeah.
This is a whole other episode of the show that we did a long time ago. One of the early episodes is what if Qui-Gon had lived.
Mhm.
You know, that's a whole show you guys could go back and check out that we talk about that is Anakin could have been a very different person and very different things could have happened. Or the same thing could have happened. It just could have gone in a different way.
Yeah, I think George Lucas wants us to think that line, that things would have happened globally in the same sense. Anakin had to fall to then be redeemed by his son. That's a very Christian concept as well. But just going back to the Trinity of the Father, Son, and the Daughter, this concept comes originally, again, in Sanskrit, in Indic texts from South Asia. The idea of creation and destruction being this infinite cycle that's beyond our control, and we're merely passengers to this worldly drama, is emphasized in the Sikh concept of the universe and the perception that we all have one common origin, the unifying force, the Big Bang, right? The energy, space-time was created in an instant by something. In science, we can't explain that something. We're trying to find a grand unifying theory, which is a concept in quantum and not metaphysics, in actual physics, about how energy, space, and time were created. But we don't know how. We just know that roughly, according to like historical data and data that we have at present, that about 13 billion years ago, the Big Bang happened, and the universe and all the thousands and hundreds of thousands of galaxies and star systems as we know it was created in an instant. But the description for humans to understand this endless eternal cycle of creation and destruction of the same matter and energy just taking new forms, in us as humans, in the circular life, as James Earl Jones, David said, Mufasa. The concept of that is a trinity itself, and that's described in the idea of these gods or goddesses. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and then Shiva, the destroyer. So that's the original trinity that exists in world faith and in philosophy. And as people traveled and talked and discussed and had these great conversations through time, from 10,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago, coming to then ancient Greece, coming to Alexander's time, when Alexander spread the idea of the Greek religions and the Greek mythology. You even get it in Scandinavia and Northern Europe. The idea of the original most powerful god or godly type character, an avatar of the original main single god, comes through in Thor, Hela, and Odin being the father. And that is actually what I feel. I don't know if Filoni and Lucas deliberately did that, but I think this just points to our psyche, our collective consciousness, that we go back to the similar truths and the same stories, as Joseph Campbell outlined. Odin is the All-Father, the thunder god, the god of the sky. Thor is the goodness and the nobility and the sun. And Hela is the concept of what we get Hel, the word from. She is evil, she's corrupted. And they just kind of, if they did use it as a basis, they just switched it out. And the daughter is the good and the son is the evil on Mortis. And the son then confronts Anakin in the second chapter of the Mortis arc and says, again, he echoes what the father had told Anakin. You think of Jedi, Sith, light and dark. It's too basic. You got to wise up. The universe is a lot more than that. And your concept of light and dark is just binary and too straightforward. It's a lot more complex. We're all
many shades of gray.
Exactly. It's the Grey Jedi idea that's come from fans kind of brings this concept. And the idea is George Lucas is saying the Jedi Order became a religion. And Luke Skywalker says the ancient Jedi religion. That's a direct quote from The Last Jedi. He talks about how Darth Sidious exposed the flaws, the hubris of the Jedi. And the hubris of the Jedi is what George Lucas's modern day commentary is on organized religion. The same as what I mentioned my favorite poet in English, William Blake, talked about. That human corruption, due to materialism, due to financial desire and the lust for power, corrupts even the most noble systems if we allow it to happen, and we get distracted by the Senate being corrupt and the Clone Wars happening and the Jedi becoming soldiers and generals rather than keepers of the peace. They become warriors. Again, it's a dichotomy that occurs due to misunderstanding and due to the ego coming in the way of harmony and peace.
Well, and we see that there's a whole lot more to interpretations of the Force in the Star Wars universe. There was the interpretation that we had in the Acolyte. The Clone Wars itself shows us this, because we just came off of a Witches of Dathomir arc. So there's a whole other, like the Dathomirian interpretation of the Force and the use of the Force, and as it being more magic than harnessing of the Force. It's all an interpretation, or in my opinion, all an interpretation of the same thing. It's all there. It's in, and if you want to go down the rabbit hole more, we are about out of time. But tomorrow right there is on Clone Wars Revisited. They are in season 3, episode 16, I believe. Yeah, because episode 15 was Overlords, and then episode 16 would be that next one in the Altar of Mortis. So go check them out. See if what that next thing shows us. Yeah. Yes.
I was going to say that just because, as you mentioned earlier, I tried to get it in, but just because Neil deGrasse Tyson suddenly embraces spiritualism doesn't make it any more valid than it already isn't or is.
Well, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, I don't know if he embraces. I don't know if it's more of an embracing spiritualism as a not embracing atheism. I think it's
it goes back to the appropriation thing that we were talking about earlier, and that'll be a whole other conversation, I guess, for another episode.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a level of thing to where everything I see on Neil deGrasse Tyson is just, he doesn't want what his belief or what he's putting out to be radicalized in any way. So I think I think his current term is agnostic as opposed to atheist, and just be out there and be his religion is science, which that's a whole other topic. But anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Scoob, everybody in the comments. Oh, I've forgotten everybody. Like Santi is in the comments.
Santi, Sherry.
Thanks everybody for watching. And if you have any ideas for topics, things that you want us to get into, we've got a couple of ideas, a couple of things coming, because there's a lot of stuff coming up in 2026. But if you have ideas, please go ahead and let us know. Thanks, Scoob. We love you too, man. All the time.
Yeah.
But until next time, may the Force be with you.
Always.
May the Force be with you all. And remember, you have friends everywhere.
Yes.